Hello and welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Worst podcast, where we watch movie trilogy series and filmmakers' bodies of work in an attempt to deduce which movies are south of okay but north of cancer. I am your host Conan, and joining me today are
I'm Grana, and it's the opinion of the backup deputy that this is going to be a damn good podcast.
And I'm Luke Morgan, and pain is how your body talks to you. You do well to listen to it.
all right. Such gritty, witty dialogue as that. It means we're talking about the most non-trilogical trilogy that I think we've probably done so far. Three movies written by done by writer-director S. Craig Zahler. So those are, of course, Bone Tomahawk, Brawl in Cell Block 99, and Dragged Across Concrete. Grana, you're a bit of a stickler for the rules. Are these a trilogy? Do they possess any traits, do you think, that could be?
Oh, look, I think any semblance of things having to be a trilogy on this podcast went out the door when we did the Nolan trilogy. that opened the doorway for anything we wanted to do. Any three films by the same director, any three films with the same actor, any three films with the same letter in the title, we can do it. We can call it a trilogy. We can justify it. But seriously, I mean, they feel like a trilogy in the same way that the Blood and Ice Cream trilogy feels like a trilogy to me. Maybe not quite as intertwined. Obviously, there's not the same actors throughout the whole thing, but obviously it's the same writer-director. And the movies don't necessarily have similar themes, but have similar... What's the word I'm looking for? Gratuitous violence? I don't know.
Yeah, like they feel like a comparison that's made a lot is Tarantino. They feel like any of three Tarantino's films could be a trilogy.
Yeah,
like dealing with his westerns, and it's like they're not related, but they are because they feel like they're of the same piece. Yeah, Luke, what about you? Did you find this? Did this offend your Nolan sensibilities?
No. I think there's definitely a style behind these films, and like it felt like watching a director's three works. It didn't feel like, oh wow, this is out of left field and something different. And obviously, each movie, as we'll talk about, has that scene in it, and it's like every time that scene is happening, or sometimes a few of them in a row, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I was like, this is very violent. I was like, oh, this is gonna haunt me for a couple of nights. But yeah, I don't know. I'd consider all of these like the PTSD trilogy that's just kind of left me with some nightmares and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I enjoyed it, and I think it qualifies as a trilogy. It's a director's works, so.
Yeah, that's a pretty good take. The trauma of it is that a lot of reviews and a lot of people talk about these films with that, especially Bone Tomahawk, which kind of gave Zala, the credit to make two others. People are like, this is the kind of the film that I did not expect. And whenever there's a Reddit post on the most disturbing scenes, Bone Tomahawk is always in the top three, and everyone's always like, yeah, was waiting for that, looking for this. So,
like, I had never heard of these films. I'd never heard of these films. I hadn't seen anything like that. And when I was telling my wife about them, I was like, "Oh, this is the one we're doing." I was like, "Oh, then there's Bone Tomahawk," and she was like, "Oh," she's like, "That's got that scene in it, doesn't it?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "Oh, I just remember there was like a comment post. So there was like, oh, what's like one thing from a film that stayed with you or has traumatized you?"
there it is.
And she said, and there was a description of what that scene was, and so she knew something was coming. I had no idea what I was expecting, but exactly, she had known about this scene long before knowing anything about these movies. So
That's exciting. Yeah. Griner, did you know anything about these films?
No, I didn't. I kind of assumed they were like torture porn movies. There was that run of torture porn movies out there for a while.
Like Hostel?
Yeah, Hostel's the one that comes... It feels like the one that kicked it off, right?
Yeah.
And I thought it was going to be like that. Not that I've even seen that movie, but it definitely has a reputation. So I was kind of expecting that. But maybe I'm just desensitized to violence because these were... While those scenes are like... I don't know, they're definitely gruesome, right? But I don't know, like... I don't know, maybe I played too many Mortal Kombat fatalities. Like, they just felt like that. Like, here's this brief moment of gratuitous violence, and we move on to the next thing. Like, there's no... Like, I would cringe more at a, like, prolonged scene of torture, a prolonged scene of... Like, I mean, and there's even mention just of torture in one of these movies, and I found that more disturbing than the actual violence on screen.
The violence, yeah, it's shocking more than it is disturbing in a lot of ways. Like these movies, are pretty slow, and there'll be long periods of nothing, and then kind of goes from 0 to 100 in a second. You go, oh wow! Then it catches you off guard, which is definitely the point, I think, and we'll talk about that a lot more. But I guess it's interesting you say, those torture porn films. There's a movie called The Green Inferno by Eli Roth as well, who made Hostel. That definitely has some commonalities with Bone Tomahawk that were mentioned, but yeah, it is dipping its toe in some of those pools. Maybe, I don't know. I feel like these movies kind of have a trilogical sense in terms of they're all deconstructions of genres. Like the Bone Tomahawk's obviously a western, but it is. Whenever you talk about horror westerns, I've talked about it on this podcast, and if there's ever a sort of a list or requests for them, it's usually number 1 or number 2. So even though there are the ones out there before this was kind of the one that seemed to cement the concept of that genre mashup sort of in film mainstream for whatever reason. Brawl is obviously like it's a grindhouse film, but it's a deconstruction that it's long, it's sporadic, it's weird, it's it's obviously kind of taking all the things of this and doing the opposite in a lot of ways to kind of make you to sort of question why this genre is here, like what's the purpose of it. And Dragged Across Concrete obviously is a heist film that takes 2.5 hours. It takes basically a 20-30 minute scene from any other movie, makes that the entire movie, and makes it a really, really, really long film. Like it's, it takes something that should be exciting.
Really long.
It takes something that should be exciting and sort of intentionally makes it almost unbearably long, which they're all interesting ways to engage with these genres and go, what do these mean, right?
Not to spoil it, but it's got like a stakeout scene that feels like a stakeout. That feels like you're sitting there on a stakeout all night. So yeah,
like exactly right. All right, let's talk some stats. Stats. Bone Tomahawk, written and directed by Zahler, made in 2015, had a budget of 1.8 million. It made $450,000 at the box office.
Oh,
however. I was curious about this. So the home sales are roughly estimated around 4 million. So, VOD and DVD sales made up a profit there. Has a Metascore of 72, Rotten Tomatoes of 91%. Brawl and Cell Block 99, made in 2017, budget of 4 million, made 79,000 at the box office.
Oh, God.
Home sales of roughly an estimated 2 million, so not very profitable. Metascore of 79, Rotten Tomatoes of 90%. Dragged Across Concrete, 2018, budget of 15 million, made $830,000 at the box office. Home sales were around 1.5 million. Metascore of 60, Rotten Tomatoes 76%. What do you guys think of that?
Is Zahler out of business? Like, is he just known as a money loser, or like what's happened?
Griner, what do you think?
It was just interesting to look him up and see what he's done, and it feels like he has sold so many scripts over the years. But I don't know many of them that it feel like not a lot of them feel like they got made or went on to be very popular movies. Like, and you hear about is it the Blacklist or whatever they call it, where there's these the most wanted scripts out there, and all the studios want them, and it feels like he's been on there a few times, but Yeah, I don't know. In theory, he's really good at what he does, and in practice, maybe it doesn't work out so well. I'm not really sure what to think about him.
So there's like his business model. I don't know if it's worth talking about that much, but his production company is interesting, and the people he worked with, and it contributes to his reputation as a potential troll / potential MAGA golden boy. That a lot of the discourse around him and his movies sort of focus on that. Like if you type in his name in Google, one of the first options is he conservative or is he Republican? The obsession with him as a filmmaker, writer is his politics, which is super fascinating. It's one of the reasons I'm so drawn to him, because a lot of, like most other filmmakers and directors, will have their politics up in this front, and people are like, hey, cool. This guy kind of does, but intentionally distances himself, and everyone is like, we need to know, because we need to know if we can like his work or not. It's really fascinating sort of insight into the fractured political system that we find ourselves in. But as a creator, I'll talk about this now quickly. I'm like a Zahler zealot. I love his stuff. I've read 3 of his books. So he's written a bunch of books. I'll do the brief history. He's written, like 20 plus screenplays. He's optioned a lot of them. So the way the sales work is you can option them to companies. They'll pay you a small amount of money. If it gets made, you get more. So he's sold heaps. He infamously has a script called The Brigands of Rattleborge, which topped the Blacklist one year. The Blacklist is like the majority of Oscar, Best Picture, like famous movies that get made end up, well, not the majority, but a lot of them come from Blacklist scripts. So that kind of got him famous in Hollywood a lot because he had this thing. He's written, there was a movie that was made called Asylum Blackout that he wrote the script for, a movie called Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich. Then he's written 4 or 5 books. He made these ones. He sold a bunch of scripts they'd never get made. Like at one point, one of his scripts was being made by Leonardo DiCaprio and Ridley Scott. That fell through. Chang Woo Park, who made Old Boy, was working on The Brigands of Rattleborge, but that seems to, like, because his content is all super, I don't know, it's confronting, it's violent, it's grotesque, it's alienating. It's a hard sell. And there's the reason these 3 movies get made is because they were made by a company called Cinestate. There was a Dallas-based company, only if it was around for about 5 years. But the founder, Dallas Sonnier, now works for the Daily Wire, the infamous right-wing platform with Ben Shapiro. Dallas Sonnier has gone all in. He sold it to them, and he's in there. And working for them was a guy named Adam Donahue, who was a sex pest and often called the Harvey Weinstein of Dallas. So
he's in good. It sounds like he keeps good company.
So this is the thing, right? He's kind of like, in the same way, sort of in a similar vein that most big writer-directors were in bed with Harvey Weinstein, but you can't necessarily blame them and be like, oh, Tarantino worked with him on most of his films. He's therefore a supporter of Weinstein. It's like, no, that's not quite it. And Zahler seems to be treading similar ground. He got these movies made by these guys who were not a political company necessarily, but they seem to be taking a chance. Whether or not their motivations were politically aligned, who's to say? But Zahler's a Jew turned atheist. He is not like a stoic, a conservative Christian. He's not sort of a campaigner. He's vocally about being apolitical. So to me, it seems more like these are people who get him made. Whether or not they shared his sensibilities, he didn't care for. I don't know. Maybe he is political, but every interview he's ever given, he says, "I don't care for it. They just made the movies and they liked my stuff." And all of Hollywood seems to think he's very talented. They just no one wants to take a risk on 3-hour ultra-violent westerns, which is
money at the box,
as we have seen. So it is sad. He's out of he's pretty much out of business now. It looks like there's no. Until another company comes along that's willing to take a chance on him, because he doesn't compromise in his work. He's very clear about, Dragged Across Concrete, notoriously, he got director's final cut, which is really rare for young filmmakers. And that's why it is 2 hours and 40 minutes. The studio wanted it to be 2 hours, and he was like, no. And so this is the thing. A lot of, it's very divisive whether or not that was a good or bad choice. But say what you will, he knows what he wants and he's not willing to compromise. And so it's kind of, I doubt he will make another film in Hollywood for a long time because he's just not gonna do it. Thank you for listening to my spiel about S. Craig Zahler.
Yeah.
His books are really good. You should read his books if you can. I'll come back to those points. We talked about the legacy. Did you guys find these political films? Before we get into them specifically.
The third one, I think, particularly is a little on the nose in places.
Okay.
And I think even just the subject matter of it is divisive politically, but in some ways.
There's definitely characters.
There's definitely a scene that's like, oh, cancel culture is bad. It's like, all right. And I don't even know that he makes terrible points, the points that he's making necessarily, but he definitely has a point. It definitely has it feels like a politically motivated point of view to some extent.
Okay, so you do feel like he believes what he's saying, and he is saying these are his opinions projected.
It's hard. I think so. If you are the creative force behind a movie, and you're not compromising the way it sounds like he isn't, and he is the writer and the director. It's hard to not take those as his direct words.
Okay.
That's the thing. I mean, we could get into it when we talk about the third movie, but that's the question. And I think we talked about this when you first talked about these movies a couple of weeks ago, Cohen, is like,
Mm.
he cast Mel Gibson in this role. That's like a controversial thing already.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, though, you cast a person who's known as kind of a racist asshole, and you cast him as a racist asshole. So like, is that I don't know. It's not like it's not like Mel Gibson comes across as like a really great guy. He comes across definitely as, there's stuff he's trying to do right. And he's not doing things the right way. He's a flawed person. So is that the commentator saying, is that Zahler saying like, these people aren't all bad and they may have these points of views, but of course he has this point of views because he's a racist asshole or whatever. Or is it him making comments himself through that character and through this movie? But I don't know. It's interesting. It definitely, I feel like the third one, especially to like the start of the film and then a lot of the speeches that they have and a lot of the conversations they have, it very much feels like that's comment on today's political culture and like complain about the stuff that we believe in and stuff that we feel like goes against us. And it's the only time where really it felt to me where I was just like, yeah, I know, I get it. I see this stuff online all the time. Like, it felt a bit preachy in a few things to me personally, but
Like, yeah, and neither of you are alone in this. Like, this is the discourse. There are half the people who decry him and say that he should be cancelled and he's awful. Say the same stuff. They say that he's clearly is a believer in this stuff. Others, there are others who take him as the only man standing up for free speech, and then there are others who, I think, where I fall into the camp of is that he's just a reactionary filmmaker. His goal is to make you feel something, have a visceral reaction. Like, even the name of the movie, Dragged Across Concrete, is pretty, like, it's a feeling. It's like, this is what it's going to do. It's going to show you 2 hours and 40 minutes of nothing and make you feel like
drag you across concrete.
Exactly right. And I think that, we'll probably talk about more, but I do think that as a filmmaker, he's using a lot of this stuff. Like, he has seen this stuff online as well. And he's going, yeah, cancel culture might be bad, but people hate it, and people hate people who hate it. And I'm going to piss both people off because it's going to do something. It's going to make you either hate them or feel seen. And that's a reaction nonetheless. And like, the merits of that, whether, trolling for the sake of trolling or creating an experience in genre films, that's an interesting thing. And that is a debate that, you have to find out. You have to find where you stand out yourself. But I find it fascinating that he's able to actually do that. And he's able to sort of tread, at least for me, treads a line between, like, casting Mel Gibson is like, you guys, everyone brings their own baggage into that and says, how do you feel about Mel Gibson? Are you a supporter? You probably will think he's right. You hate him, you got to hate what he says. It's like, that's really fascinating. And, like, that's a timeless thing that directors do. They reignite careers. They cast actors who have legacies, and they say, Tarantino, again, does a lot of that. He casts Pam Grier's Jackie Brown. It's like, she's a blaxploitation figure. Yeah, you bring your legacy into that, and that affects how you feel about it. But yeah. Okay.
I mean, who better to cast as a predator as Kevin Spacey? So why not cast Kevin Spacey as a predator? It's that sort of mind frame, but it kind of works because, like, I don't know, it's a weird thing where I enjoyed Mel Gibson in that role. I thought he played it well, and it's like, I don't know. Obviously, we probably won't see many films with Mel Gibson these days, and it was kind of different to see someone who is a big name in Hollywood and was a big leading man, but he's not now, obviously, and it was kind of different to see him in a role again. But yeah, and played it well. Seems true to him. So
you got to wonder how much of it was acting, right?
Yeah. They just filmed him backstage with
All right, the cameras are off. Say whatever you feel.
Yeah, sit down at this cafe, guys. Listen to this music.
Keep rolling. Yeah. I do have plenty more to say about the interesting political discourse, but it's probably not worth it. So let's move on, unless you guys have any other pre-thoughts you want to say.
No, let's dig into it.
Bone Tomahawk. In the dying days of the Old West, an elderly sheriff and his posse set out to rescue the town's doctor from cannibalistic troglodytes.
So,
tell me your thoughts.
Two thoughts. First, as I was watching this, I was like, man, Western horror, how cool! Like this is,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's different, it's cool, it's got its own feel to it. Three thoughts actually. I'm going to add an extra one. Kurt Russell is awesome. Like
So
I
good.
love Kurt Russell. He's awesome in this. I want to see him in so many more westerns. I'm sure that he's in others that I need to go watch. And it is so weird starting this movie because I love Matthew Fox, and it was so good seeing Matthew Fox in a film.
Yeah.
And I like Matthew Fox. I thought he was good in this.
I mean, you're
Grinders-
allowed to have that opinion.
Grinders going to come with a spicy accent, but it was just super random because I thought about Matthew Fox like 3 days before watching this movie for the first time in ages because I'm a big Lost fan, and I was just like, I was like, whatever happened to that guy? Why did Jack from Lost never do anything after that? And then to start this movie,
This
and he
movie
walks
proves
in,
why he had never done anything after that.
I like his character.
Yeah, you didn't like it, Grant?
Grindr, you go.
I don't know. I agree. I like Matthew Fox. I think he's great in Lost. Something about his character and his portrayal of this character in this movie, I just did not click with me.
I loved him. I loved him in this movie.
Bruder.
God damn. I thought he was good.
Grant, what did you think of this? Let's start here because
I liked this movie.
Okay.
Like I agree with Luke. It's a great concept. It's really interesting. And even though this movie is long and it's slow for a lot of it, I was enthralled. Like I was really invested in these characters and what they were doing. My first note was like, is David Arquette a good actor? Like, I actually really liked him here. I hate him in Scream. I can't stand Dewey. I think he's a waste of screen time. But I actually really enjoyed the little bit of his character we got in this movie.
Yeah.
The deputy, what is it? The deputy
Jenkins, what's his name?
No, the backup deputy. Sorry, the backup deputy. He was great. I loved him. Yeah. As a character, like at first I thought, oh, this dude is so stupid. He's like, that tea smells disgusting. It's soup. Oh, can I have some? He's like really good, but then like he's like the smartest guy in this whole movie. Yep. So he was a fun character. Patrick Wilson is like the most that guy actor ever. I think.
I love Patrick Wilson. He is such an underutilized performer. Like he should have had he should have been like a leading man, but he's never had the luck.
He was like the main bad guy in Aquaman, and that movie was bad.
There you go. Yeah, and like
it wasn't necessarily his fault, but
he's been stuck in Insidious and the Conjuring movies.
Yeah,
it's like.
Am I weird? I really thought he kind of looks like Chris Pratt, and my wife just disagreed with me completely. I was just
Patrick Wilson,
Chris Pratt vibes.
Do all white guys look the same to you, Luke? Is that what's happening?
Oh yeah, you've exposed me.
Kurt Russell's on the screen. You're like, hey, that's Matthew Fox. No, I'm not saying that. I'm sorry.
But sorry. I'll just finish my point. I really like this movie. I think I was enthralled by it all the way through. I do think it stumbles at the last hurdle, and I'm happy to get into that later. But
all right, we will. Yeah, I think the characters and the performance. It's like this movie. It becomes a recurring thing. Zahler's really big on character. That's his writing ethos. He's like, it's all about character. You get in their head and you make them authentic. And that's like this film lives and dies on that, right? You've got this interesting group of characters who feel really fleshed out, who feel like there's genuine growth in it as well across this journey. They all feel like they've got that great thing where they all have one goal, but they're all kind of in it for different reasons. Like Bruder's constantly antagonistic to them because he's like he just kind of wants to be the hero, and he's got a bit of an unsaid, like, you're not really sure if he's just trying to bang the doctor's wife or not. But it's like, but they're all united.
Can you blame him?
It really works where it's like, yeah, they've all got a mission, and no one really knows if they're going to survive or if they should trust anyone. But yeah, they're just all super fleshed out. Like they're archetypal, but they're also really genuine. Like, and you're right, Richard Jenkins plays Chicory. He's so the scene towards the end where he talks about the flea circus.
Yeah. Oh, I love that scene. That's so good.
So good. It's a kind of it's really stupid, but it's super beautiful as well. And after everything's happened, like, this really works.
I love when he's telling Kurt Russell that he's going to avenge him. After he gets told, like, oh no, I was only saying it to make him feel better. He'll be avenged. And he's like, I'll avenge you. We'll make up for this. I swear.
His heart's in the right place.
Yeah.
Exactly is. The What do you guys think of the dialogue? Because it's authentic, but it's also, I don't know if it's authentic. It's kind of trying to be authentic. I don't know. Do you guys find it off-putting at all? Is it hard to sort of to navigate?
Look, I found Zala's dialogue generally off-putting. I think he's a poor imitation of Tarantino, but I think it works in this movie. Ooh. In this movie, I do think it works. I think the style lines up with the setting for the most part.
Yeah, like older English. Feels more archaic. Yeah.
Well spoken, or at least that's our view of them in the past. I know they were probably all very illiterate and probably didn't speak very well, but people are always
words because they're all drunk and
but people are often depicted as well spoken in the past for some reason. It's a trope, but
yeah. Luke, what did you think?
No, I agree. I found it I never found it really jarring or anything like that, but I think it works best in this setting, and it wasn't really something. It felt natural in this one for me personally, but
no,
I really liked it.
Yeah, it does. It just it keeps everything interesting. Like for me, the way every statement gets said, it kind of there's this brief almost moment where you've got to think about what it means and go, okay, it's almost like you're problem solving the whole time, but not in an exhausting way. It's like they'll say a phrase and you go, oh yeah, okay, that means this, and it just creates. It's sometimes the crack show. Like there are definitely parts where you're like, you can tell he probably wrote down, we need to go there, and then he was like, how do I change this? And he's like, we need to traverse over yonder. It's like you didn't need to add that in, but it's a quirk. But yeah, I think the Old West setting definitely covers a lot.
Adds to it. Oh,
yeah, definitely creates some authenticity. Did you guys notice in the
What are your thoughts on the dialogue, Conan?
I love it. I really like. Again, his writing style it really is like it's off-putting or it's like it works for you or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I've watched a bunch of YouTube videos of people being like, it works for similar reasons. Like it's just a different way to think of it. And in his books, he does a similar thing. There's one where one of his protagonists in one book, he just says junk is like a way of saying as a swear. So whenever he's thinking or whatever something happens, he says junk. I'm like, no one says junk. There's not a human being in the world who says that. But in this weird, twisted world of Zala's imagination, I'm like, oh yeah, I get what it means, and like that just makes it for a compelling view, especially in a film that is so like it's pretty obviously not trying to be realistic, right? It has cannibals with throat whistles.
Yeah.
So like if everyone talks a little bit weird, that's the least of my problems with if we're going to sort of play science at it. Yeah.
We should talk about the throat whistles. That was like you often horror movies often have like a theme for the bad guys, for the monster, right? But it's very rarely something that's heard in world. And I appreciated that in this movie where the characters were like, did you hear that? Like, what the hell was that? Like, it was. I think your advice was to watch it with headphones, which I did do. It's like a very eerie, spooky sound. It works really well. It's a very good use of that sound.
I'd never watched it with headphones until this time, and I'm so glad I did because there's just little notes that you hear and bits that you like I'd never picked up on before. I'm like, oh, this really is kind of like it's a lot more subtle than you realize.
I watched it just on my TV stereo with subtitles on, so it was like eerie music, and I was like, "Oh, the eerie music's back."
Man, I bet there is, guys.
Oh, it sounds ominous. Yeah.
It's great. It's a great way to introduce the opening scene. The opening scene is a fantastic way to introduce the film. I think, like, just starts off with this awful throat slitting, and
slow, just like jagged, like not slick. It's not like
nothing. There's no Game of Thrones sort of things here. It's just like this guy's cutting into a loaf of bread with a fork. Going well. And then you got David Arquette and Sid Haig, like two sort of known quantities in the horror genre.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon, you start to hear this eerie whistling. It's just, I don't know, did the opening scene work for you guys? Because this is like, it hooked me from the first moment. And I just remember being like, even the framing, just the awkward kind of, here's a frame, everything is clear, you can see everything that's happening. And it's just like, I feel unease. I feel unease
Yeah.
And it really worked, I think. Did you guys feel the same? Or
Yeah, totally. Like the moment I hear that sound and then the characters react to it, like, oh shit, like that's not just a, that's not a musical cue. That's not a theme. That's in world. That's spooky as.
yeah,
It's like, well, I'm in.
Yep. No, it was what prompted my thought earlier when like I started watching this. As soon as that opening scene's going on, and it was just like, oh man, like why is Western horror not more of a thing? I was like, this is like really unique. Like it just, yeah, straight away. I love that opening scene. I'm a fan of David Arquette, more for his professional wrestling days, but like anytime I see him, I'm like, oh, good on you, David.
Yeah, it's good to see he's still getting work. There's a lot of there are other interesting like little actors like that. I don't know if you guys realize, but in the bar scene where everyone comes in, the pianist, that's that's the principal from Back to the Future. Strickland, that's his name.
Oh,
I blanked on me.
yeah.
Seems to have had no real career at all, and no acting since then. And he just turns up in this random little one-off scene.
Maybe he's just a drunk in a bar playing piano these days.
Like maybe this is a doco. I don't know.
Yeah.
It could go. Like, so Western horror is interesting, right? This is a fusion. There's like these things called Italian cannibal films. So there's a whole subgenre of like in the 80s, these exploitation movies came out. Like Cannibal Holocaust is the most infamous, and they're basically just movies about white people going into the Amazon or areas like that, and these savage tribes cannibalize and eat them. So it's got a pretty like they're an interesting history. A lot of them were banned in countries and stuff. And that is a directly problematic genre, right? Like it was very much made with this idea of these savages eat innocent white people, often virgins. Like you read the plot synopsis for Cannibal Holocaust, it's pretty atrocious. And obviously Westerns have a spotty history as well of being, America's West is one of bloody racism. And for a long time, the genre was sort of patriotic exceptionalism, And so I think it's a really cool way to sort of explore that, which again is the treading of the line of controversy, where he's creating a Western that is a problematic genre. He's mashing it with another problematic genre, and he's making a super problematic film, if that's the way you interpret it. Did you guys think that? Like, did you guys have any issue with that sort of subject matter or that content?
Not particularly. I did. It almost felt a little on the nose to have the professor of the town be a Native American, who then basically denounces these people, so that it's not cowboys and Indians now. It's troglodytes. Troglodytes in this small town. It's not, they're not going and hunting natives. They're just hunting troglodytes, which is just a monster now. It felt like an easy hand waving way to be like, oh, this is not racist.
So did you think it is? So unpacking that, do you think that it is an undercurrent of racism, or do you think
no? Look, if this movie existed in a bubble on its own, I wouldn't think that at all. Like, I wouldn't have had that opinion at all. Knowing the other movies and knowing a little bit about now who the production company is behind this movie, I don't know. I could be convinced if someone really wanted to make the point, but I don't feel that way. I don't feel strongly that way. No.
Yeah. Okay. Luke, what do you think?
Like Griner said, like there's obviously that comment, and they introduce that character basically for only that. It's not like he's an ongoing character.
That's right.
That follows them on the journey and teaches them about stuff. He's just there basically to make that statement and be like, "Good luck, boys." But yeah, I didn't see it that way. It's like, I don't know. It just, especially once it's introduced, because that's the thing. The whole movie, I didn't know what it was. Like, okay, they're referred to as monsters and stuff but are they actual monsters, or is it just people, or what's, like, I didn't know what it was going to be. Like, are they just normal people, that happen to eat like the taste of humans and just want to eat people as well? But I don't know, definitely the way they're portrayed with the teeth and all this sort of stuff, and it's just, and their strength, it's very much like, I don't know, something unnatural about them. So I can see it as just a monster film. So
yeah, that's exactly it. Like, it's interesting you note about the professor. He comes in that one scene. He essentially gives permission for the film to make the bad guys these Native American monsters. But it's like, you can read it that way, or you can read it as well. Look, for most of the Western genre, that was how Native American characters were also relegated. They were relegated as kind of you'd have a token Indigenous person who would go, who was like, yes, I agree with this, and it's like, oh, cool, now we can feel better ourselves. So it's like, it begs the question: is he commenting on that? And is that kind of part of a nod? It's like, yeah, this has been the way we use this, and so I'm making a genre film. I'm going to do the same, or is it like, or is he like, I believe this? Yeah, it's.
It does feel like he's making a genre film, and he's just going like maybe one step extra to cover his ass. By they never refer to them as Native Americans or Indians again. They refer to them as troglodytes for the rest of the movie. Like, quite very specifically seems to be turning them into monsters rather than.
That's exactly right.
They do talk about Matthew Fox's character and how many Indians he's killed and talk that, but
again, there's his whole thing is like, there's that scene, he's like, that's an ugly brag. He's like, it's no brag.
It's a fact.
And then they talk about it is he's like, why do you love killing them so much? He's like, well, when it makes an impression on a boy to see his wife and sister murdered. It's like, okay, on the terms of the film, you have to sort of understand him and go, okay, is he right in what he's doing? No. But you can't help but go, yeah, like, what does savagery do to somebody? And what do we know about the West? There was a time where there was already ingrained racism. It's kind of like, yeah, this is exactly how a person at this time would react. Is it problematic to make a film about that in 2015? I don't think so. Other people do. Like, there is definitely a group, a large subculture that thinks movies like this have no place in modern day, and that's fine. That's their opinion.
I also think 2015 is very different than 2023 as well.
That's also true. Yeah.
Not much. Yeah, not many years apart, but a lot of difference. So.
Yeah. What about the pacing of this movie? Did that work for you guys? Because there is a lot of character build up at first. Then there's.
I think it works in this film. I like just staying with the characters and just letting the scenes happen. You know, like you're laying there on a night while they're just laying there looking at the stars and having conversations and trying to figure stuff out and learning who each other are and everything like that. Yeah. I like how it's done. It doesn't always hit the spot in his other films, but this one, no, I enjoyed just the slow build, and then really the third act, it's just flat out almost like it's a lot just starts happening, and it's like, oh god, okay, I wasn't expecting all of it to come falling down this quick, but yeah, it's good.
Yeah, the trek through the desert really feels long and arduous, as it is, and like I think you're right. It does work in this movie.
Yeah, it's funny. I think about it on paper, and I'm like, a movie where it's this dude's writing, and it's like, here's what they camped this night, and maybe something happens, and here's where they camp, and now his leg breaks. I'm like, it sounds so boring, but every time I watch this movie, I'm like, there's something about it that's enthralling. It's really, it's kind of the magic of good filmmaking, where like you're just into it, and you're like, yeah, it works. I'm invested. I'm along for the ride. I think it's pretty beautifully shot. Like, and enough happens to make everything interesting. Also worth noting, the music. Zahler composes all the music for his film, so all the scores you hear he's doing, he composed the cool blues rhythm songs in the other two.
Interesting. That's cool.
He could have been John Carpenter. He could have been the modern John Carpenter, but
he chose to be racist.
Got too political.
Yeah, I'm going to cancel you. That scene. What? Do you just love it? Do you just love it?
It's here's the thing. So obviously I talked about earlier about like all these films have this scene, and my wife was waiting for it, and she couldn't watch it. She couldn't bring herself to watch it. She doesn't like seeing that sort of stuff. But kind of like Griner, this didn't bother me too bad. Like it's like, oh, that would hurt. That's not pleasant.
You'll feel that in the morning.
But it is maybe it is just a thing where I'm desensitized. But there was stuff in the other films which I'll talk about that I was like way more like, oh god, like that's nasty, you know, more than this. But maybe like I said, we've grown up with Mortal Kombat. I've seen these fatalities, you know.
That genuinely just reminded me of a fatality in Mortal Kombat. Like I'm sure some guy has been split in half down the middle.
Oh yeah, like
more than once in Mortal Kombat.
Everyone has what
it almost feels cartoonish, I guess is the word, right? which makes it a little less shocking, I think.
That's
It does,
the
right?
thing.
Yeah.
The scalping and then like nailing the
scalping
scalp
was
in his
worse.
mouth.
Yeah.
That was worse than the split. So like
And even
it's
Matthew
just
Fox losing his hand, like that moment happens so quick. Like you don't even have
so
time to
quick.
know what the hell happened. And then like, wait, his hand is gone. What the hell? Like that felt more brutal and violent than him getting split up.
That's the thing. Like his violence throughout all the films, but it's very much just like, oh no, this is what happens. Like you don't get shot up and it's like, okay, cool. Like something happens or something hits you. It's brutal and like his hand's gone just like that. And it's like, okay, yeah, no, he's done for. He's done for, basically straight up. This hero who's been wandering around the countryside just gets hit with this thing and he's done for. So
Useless.
Yeah, it's realistic in that sense, right? It's sudden and it's not flashy and it's confusing, and I think it really gets you in the like it kind of puts you in the mind space of that, right? Like I think about all the gunfights. There's a scene where Patrick Wilson's sleeping, and one of the troglodytes shoots him, tries to shoot with an arrow, and you're just like, what the hell's going on? Because he's stumbling and one of them's trying, and it's just like shots are missing.
The fuck is that scene? All right, that scene is my biggest problem with this whole movie.
Really?
Yeah, up until then, like this brutality. It happens really quickly. Like the troglodytes are obviously very efficient killers. They're really good at what they're doing. And then two of them sneak up on him while he's asleep, and they basically fumble. And like, if you want to make the call that one of them was the one that drank the morphine, I'd be like, okay, I believe you. But what about the other guy? Like, I don't understand. I feel like that scene was such a misstep. I don't know. What do you guys think?
it felt odd to me. But
and like even just the way they sneak up on him and stand behind a little bush on the bank of this little ravine, like
they didn't feel like monsters anymore.
No, they didn't feel like monsters. They felt like really clumsy, tall dudes who've been living in the dark all their lives,
Which they are.
But all the rest of them are super efficient killers that will take your head off in a second. And here they're tripping over themselves to kill a guy who's asleep.
There isn't.
And can't hit him with an arrow. He's asleep.
Well, he shoots his hat because he thinks that's his head. There's an earlier scene. There's an earlier scene where something similar happens, where one of them, can't remember his name, but one of them sort of stops, and it's the same thing. It's kind of like a weird pause, and there's this sense of like, and I wonder if part of it's, I don't know how much of it's.
Are they reacting to what is this gun?
Yeah, nothing. I feel like I wonder if part of it's intentionally like, because this movie's riddled with comedy, right? Like a lot of the characters are just telling jokes and making. There's a lot of like weird little misnomers and offhand comments to each other. Like there's a lot of banter in it, and so like,
sorry, I'll just point out one. I love where they call the horse of Chicory. I think he's not a handsome horse. Like it's just a really good offhand line.
That's it. Like there's all these great moments, and so these kind of work for that same. I think these work in the same way. Like sometimes these guys are absolute killers, and it's just someone's just lost his hand with a tomahawk. But then other times they kind of stop and they're like, they look around and they see them and then they go and attack. It's like, that's not really, they're not hunters. They're kind of, they're monsters. They're inbred savages who just kind of, like they're animals. They don't really know what to do.
The inbred savages who tracked a man all the way across the desert and took him out in a town full of people. Like, I feel like in every other moment they're bloodthirsty and they're brutal, and here they're tripping over themselves to kill him. And then from there he has the upper hand. And I love when he's got the upper hand and he's sticking the thing in his mouth and doing the whistle. Like, love that. Give me more of that. I don't know. Something about that scene really was like, oh, that's such a misstep.
Some of the filmmaking, I think, because it uses practical effects. And so some of the filmmaking there's something lost in translation where it'll go to happen. Like one of them will go to run, and then it'll cut to like a scene of someone getting their head shot off. And you can tell what they've done is they've had to cut, put a bottle in, blow their head up, right?
Yeah.
So there is like this, there's trying to make it like use practical effects. You have to stage it differently. And so something definitely gets lost in that, where you can't show someone sprinting and then have a practical dummy of their head blow up, because you can't throw the dummy and expect us to think it's run. It'll look weirder. So there is this weird, like there are definitely things like that. I agree with you. There are scenes that look clunky, and I think part of it's like it's the sacrifice of that for to have a practical effects, which I like. So I forgive it on that sense. But
maybe it's I do feel like some of these problems are budgetary as well. Like these movies don't have the biggest budgets. I imagine some of these. There's a fair few, name actors in these movies. They're not the biggest stars in Hollywood, but in this one, it's a fairly decent sized cast. And I imagine $15 million doesn't go very far to pay for them.
No. 15 million was dragged. This is 1.8.
Sorry, 1.8. 1.8 million probably doesn't go very far at all.
I'm genuinely confused how I feel like a lot of them were just invested. They're like, this is a good project. We like this material. And I imagine there was probably some, we'll make back on the profit, which there was none of. So, but there's definitely budgetary restrictions here, which are going to naturally affect it. I don't know. Do you guys have anything else to say about Tomahawk before we move on?
Just the moment. There's that grotesque moment at the end where they see the wives. And I was like, "Oh, this guy watched that episode of the X-Files. He watched Home."
For sure, right?
100% was inspired by that episode. There's no way he wasn't. But that was disturbing. That was good. Yeah. I was kind of hoping this maybe is a poor reflection on me, but I was kind of hoping the wife had a worse outcome. Like she'd at least had a scratch on her.
You're racist.
I was, maybe maybe you didn't really see her face properly to the end, and you find out that she's got the two stakes in her eyes, like the wives. I don't know. I feel like he could have done a bit more with her. I feel like she just got off scot-free.
That's the thing. Like, it really seemed like for someone who'd been stuck with savages for several days and who did that to their own women and just turned them into these breeding things that couldn't move or run or think or whatever. Like she seemed unharmed. I did see commentary. I was reading a thread on Reddit that were talking about, is it implied that they did stuff with her, and that's how she knows exactly how many there are? Once you see the wife, but she doesn't seem that traumatized. She's quite laid back.
You could know the numbers just from the guards, and there's two.
Yeah. So I didn't get that impression at all watching it. I felt like I was like, man, why have they not harmed her yet? So that doesn't. It seems uncharacteristic.
Or flash forward for a few months and she's pregnant. I don't know. Give us something really horrifying.
Is that the post-credit sting?
Maybe.
We finally had a baby, and it's got full jaws, big hanging out like a predator, and it's like
it comes out whistling out of its throat.
Does a whistle, yeah.
I think. Yeah, I think. I think there's probably two ways to read it. One is intentionally not doing that to go, again, traditionally these movies kind of revel in abuse of the vulnerable wife, right? Or the fair maiden, and they often be violence against women is an engine for the heroic man to come in and rescue. And it's kind of compelling that she isn't that. She's never a victim of that. She's the smartest one in the room at all times.
Yeah.
And it's just so there's that way to read it. The other way is that the troglodytes are literally just animals. They're not thinking about how to breed or procreate. They're barely even thinking about anything. All they think about is violence, basically, and they kill.
I just think there's too much planning and cutting off the other women's legs and taking out their eyes, though. For that to be
and that is only
super
men.
True. Yeah.
Maybe they're not. Maybe they don't find white women attractive, which is valid. Is a fair thing.
They have other race things. They won't eat black guys. So
yeah, exactly. Monster troglodytes can be racist too, which is, I think it's neat. It's necessary here for anyone out there who thinks they can't. Luke, did you have anything more to say? Oh, yes, sorry.
I was just going to say that I really like that. It's kind of Kurt Russell's final line of "Say goodbye to my wife. I'll say hello to yours." I thought that's well written. I enjoyed that. That was good.
Such a good line.
Yep.
I liked hearing the three shots.
Yeah.
Kurt Russell at the end is like, okay, cool. That I was like, boom. Okay, he's got him. Cool.
Yeah.
They can go live happily ever after now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really
until the baby's born. But yeah.
All right. Well, that was Bone Tomahawk. Still is.
Did anyone find it an oddly happy ending?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. That was my problem.
That was your problem with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just, I don't know.
I mean, all of the characters we've come to know and love are dead, basically. Bright Hopes
the ones we really cared about survived.
Bright Hopes without a sheriff, so who knows what's going to happen there. Who knows what kind of ravaged
not a bright hope for that town.
No, exactly right.
That's why you have a backup deputy, right?
Mate, true. Don't forget.
Sheriff goes down, deputy goes down, backup deputy steps in.
they've now got to walk back the whole way, and Patrick Wilson's leg is buggered, so he's not going anywhere. He dies halfway on there.
But he's got a doctor now.
That's true.
And he specifically brought the medical kit. Like,
it's a good point.
Yeah. Nice, neat little bow.
I don't know. I found it. I think it's nice after the amount of horror they endure. I'm like,
it was surprising. It was surprising. I was like, okay,
yeah.
But yeah.
Well, yeah. All of these movies sort of have an upbeat, which
Cell Block 99, maybe not as much.
78 days. Anyway, all right. Brawl and Cell Block 99. After being fired from his tow truck driving job, Bradley, a former boxer turned drug runner, finds himself in prison. He's forced to delve through a battleground to assassinate a cellmate and save his family. I just want to know, I think the concept of these movies are great. Like the idea of just having to delve into the worst prison known to man is just a really cool idea. You know, prisons within prisons. It's like you got to kill the worst criminal out there. It's like, oh, this is going to go.
But it's been done before.
Name the
Rock.
Team,
the Rock.
Oh, okay. The Raid, The Rock, other the films. Vince Vaughn. He's a beast in this film. He is a meat machine.
He's a big guy. You don't realize he's that big until this movie, I guess. I didn't anyway.
No, me neither.
He's huge.
He's like 6'4", 6'5". He is a slug of muscle. Like he's had an interesting career because he's made a lot of. You know, he's obviously known as a comedian. Yeah. And he's always in these, you know, wedding crashes and stuff. But like he's had
years where he was in everything. All the
comedies. Yes, he was like hottest thing in Hollywood. Mm. But he has always tried his hand at drama as well, and he's really good at it. And I think he's been underutilized. Like his comedy, I think he's a great comedic actor, but he's a genuinely terrifying sort of presence. But he's also pretty he's relatable. He's sensitive in this as well. He's just incredibly charismatic, I think. Like you really, I don't know, he's in almost every scene of this movie, if not every scene. And like it's a testament to him as an actor that he just sort of pulls it off, I think. Or for me, he does. I don't know.
Yeah, in my opinion, I don't think he really pulled it off in this movie. I didn't love him in this movie. I mean, I have some problems with this movie. Like,
please tell.
I definitely didn't enjoy it as much as Bone Tomahawk.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I've seen some reviews of this movie, and they're like, "Oh, I love his character because he's like Jason Voorhees. He's like this force, and he can't be stopped. And he's like big, and he's silent, and he's strong. And I feel like that works in the Halloween movies because he's the bad guy. But when we're forced to, you know, look at it from his perspective, I've just kind of found him dull. I found him I just didn't find him a very compelling character. They completely undercut his wife at the start by making her have an affair. Like there's very few characters I liked in these movies at all. In this movie, sorry. And I think like the idea of this guy who's just continually thrown into situations that are kind of out of his control. It's not his fault, but he's got to fight his way through it. Like I don't mind that idea, but then you've got the police shootout at the start, which is really weirdly staged. They're throwing freaking grenades at each other and stuff. Like it's a bizarre scene, and there is no reason for him to go back there.
He makes a moral choice. He doesn't want cops to get killed.
So then he just murders every cop after that. Like he kills.
He doesn't.
Oh, he absolutely maims so many people in that medium security prison.
He maims some guards. Doesn't kill any cops.
He maims some guards.
There's a guard who literally everything he loves in life is boxing.
Yes.
All he talks about is boxing. Every time he opens his mouth, it's boxing. And the dude rips his arm off.
Yes.
He gets monstered, doesn't he?
He ruins his boxing life forever.
No, he loves teaching boxing, so he'll teach boxing for the rest of his life. He'll just never box again.
Sure.
Oh man, that's brutal.
So you're saying that if you're saying that something your family was in danger, you wouldn't just break a guard's arm because you're like, sorry, your boxing career is more important than my family? Like, what is that?
If his family is so important, don't go back to the police. Get the hell out of there.
Oh, so
he had a baby on the way, and he was like, "Oh no, you know what? No, I'll take the fall. It'll only be a couple of years." He gets
what is he doing? Obviously. Like I don't. Oh. I just can't. That character
really
just is so incongruous. Like his choices are so strange the whole way through.
Okay.
I mean, I get it after a point. Like the movie makes sense. I think you could honestly cut the first act.
All right, so that's interesting, right? Because this movie is essentially like the whole concept, the premise, everything is, and a lot of the criticisms are, It takes an hour to even get into the prison, and then an hour and a half to get to cell block 99. I think it's fascinating because it's like, let's spend an hour just building up the premise of this movie. Let's not actually just show grindhouse violence. Let's show a very slow slog through character development. There's like a 10-minute scene of him deconstructing a car with his fists. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
For me, I think it works really well, because what that does is you see him as a person, not just the meat machine. And so whether or not that works for you, that's a different thing. But you see his reasons. There's a big monologue about the cream and the milk and how he never gets the cream.
Oh, that was great. I did like that.
I think it's wonderful. And you see this relationship. It's like, okay, he is a super violent guy, and but they've both obviously got like substance abuse problems in the past, and they're trying to make something work. And there's a lot of hinted at history that we don't see, which means she's not going to just leave. And then when they're happy, they're really happy. It's like, she kind of half up to like, is he? He's probably like, he's clearly a bad guy. He's a violent, bad, like angry man, but he's also pretty tender, and he's also just trying to make the best life. And so then when the violence does burst on the screen, it's like, holy crap. I thought we we're just going to go through this prison and talk about all the, the days and what happens on Tuesdays, but instead now we're getting arms snapped in half. Like, to me, that makes it much more severe than if it was just like, here's 2 hours of bone snapping, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this movie was too long, in my opinion. Like, he needs an editor, and especially in this movie and the next movie, like somebody, because there's some really strange editing choices in this movie too. Like, some of these fight scenes don't feel good. Like,
really,
the punching and stuff feels really low impact. There's some really strange.
It feels very.
I'm glad I'm not alone in this, because I was like, am I crazy? This feels like something. This feels like someone's backyard wrestling video.
Are you guys high?
Related to
it.
No. There's the scene where he walks in the cell block 99 towards the end, where there's the guys in the room, and he's just like, all right, and he gets his dukes up, and one guy comes to approach him, like a video game, one person at a time, and he starts punching him, and it's like, I was like, oh, it looks really weird. Like, it just looks. It looks fake. It takes it out straight away, and it's just like, okay, it looks low budget. It looks like me and my mates filming ourselves punching each other, like, to try and make it look serious.
You guys, you've been brainwashed by shaky cam to think that anything still is bad.
I don't agree. I don't think that's true, but anyway.
Okay.
There's just strange, like, there's just in the middle of a fight they'll cut to him like standing kind of half heroically. Like, there's just some strange cuts. There's some strange edit. I will find the scene.
Please do.
No, because I have to pay for this movie. I'm not doing that. But it was just the strangest. I'll see if I can find it on YouTube. It felt strange. It felt like he needs an editor. He needs someone who's going to make those harder cuts, because I feel like this movie could be 30 minutes shorter at least. And I feel like it would be a tighter experience, in my opinion. But the other part of me is like, I feel like saying this, I'm like, oh, I don't know enough about movies. I'm just a simple Marvel plebeian who only likes the most straightforward of films, and I can't appreciate my IQ is not high enough to appreciate Zahler. That's how I feel talking about this sometimes. And it's not. No, I'm not saying it's your fault, but that's how I felt, because I looked these movies up on Reddit, and everyone's like, oh, I love Cell Block 99. It's so good. And I'm like, what are you smoking?
So that's my question. I wanted to ask you guys, because I think, Luke, did you just? A quick point. Did you think this was one of the weakest? Like, you didn't like this as much as Bone Tomahawk either?
I think this was the weakest of the three.
Okay. Because how do you guys...
That might be controversial, but yeah.
Well, how do you... Like, I'm curious. How do you guys account for the high scores then? It's like equal highest Rotten Tomatoes and highest Metascore. Like, I'm just curious to know. I'm not trying to be like, you're wrong because... Okay, I don't know, Variety said it's good. I'm curious to know why you think it's... Like, if you think why it got good scores, or what do you think?
I enjoyed the film. Like, I didn't think it was bad or anything like that. I enjoyed it. I didn't like this one. The violence affected me more than the other one. Like, this is the one where the scene, like that scene towards the end, I found way more like, oh, like that's the funny, like punny, but like dragged across concrete part in this.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's brutal. Like, that's really gross.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. And just like obviously there's the ending shot of him getting shot in the face. And it was just like, it felt like 10 solid minutes of just like gratuitous violence, and I was just like, I don't know if I was into that, like the whole last scene. And when I think about watching the film again, because I kind of didn't mind the first act. I quite liked all that bit with him losing his job, getting into the drug running business again, building the house up, going on this deal that he knows something's going to go wrong, but he still does it anyway. All that. It gets ridiculous with the guy throwing grenades and being like, yeah, bombs away. And just seems like a character that's like, fuck the police, and just starts shooting them. I was like, okay, this is a bit silly. And I had no idea.
I'm with you.
Like Ryan said, he dives away into that thing and then literally climbs back up the same place where he dove into the water very slowly up the pole. And I was just like, why is he going back to right here? This is awkward. But I enjoyed the opening act. I enjoyed him going into the prison. I enjoyed the guards just having a conversation, like where they're trying to take bets on how tall he is. Like, oh no, he's 6'4". I kind of enjoyed all that, but the final 20 minutes kind of turned me off watching the film again, where I was just kind of like, oh, it's just violence, and I was like, I don't know, I was just a bit off put by it. I don't know, but yeah.
I think that I love that because I think that's what the whole point is. Like he world builds, right? He builds this weird world where everyone's a bit exhausted and off, and everyone's like a pretty terrible person, and we only know because Bradley clearly has a moral code. Whether or not it makes sense to you, I think, is even beside the point. Like he's going to run drugs to make money because he got fired. He's going to go back and defend these cops, even though he knows he'll get arrested. It's like he kind of has a reason for everything he does, whether or not it seems, whether or not you can be like, why would you do that? It makes sense in his mind. And I think all of this is like the slow burn. It's like a slow burn effect, is that it just makes you sort of, okay, I feel like I'm in prison. I'm starting to relate to these people. I get it. Oh, great. Now 10 dudes getting killed because of prison brawl.
And that prison was ridiculous. Like, I don't know.
Which one?
Cell Block 99. Like, I don't know. The whole thing, he shows up, this guy's there smoking a cigar. He's got these 8 guards in black clothes, and it's like, it
was so on the nose with the Auschwitz like imagery. Like they talk about that prison at the start, and then you get there and there's like train tracks leading in the front door, and they've got SS uniforms on. Basically, it's like, oh my goodness, I wonder what he's going for here.
Walking around like a Nazi like general with a cigar, and like he's leather boots, and it's just like, okay, it just feels like, what kind of prison is this in America? Like, how does this prison actually run in today's society?
Of course they don't. Of course they don't. This is the thing. No. This whole thing's nonsense. Like, it's a grindhouse movie. It's He goes from a prison to a prison to a prison within the prison behind a torture chamber. Like,
behind the torture chamber.
It's it's complete bullcrap. And it's nonsense. Even the villains, like, He's got Udo Kier, who's just like this evil European, and he's like, I have an abortionist from Korea who's going to do this atrocious stuff. It's like, that's the most nonsensical thing I've ever heard. But it's the same point about I made earlier, like in the internal logic of these movies that are sort of a little bit like they're heightened realism because they're meant to be grindhousey. I'm like, this is just a world where everyone is super shit. Everyone's really bad.
Yeah, I get it. Like, and I was okay with like the weird imagery, and I'm okay with the over-the-topness of it. I don't know. The character choices did not have logic to me.
Yeah, okay.
And I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't an assassination target. I was kind of excited that he's got to get to this big bad criminal, and that it was just the guys just setting him up. I was like,
and you're just like, boy.
I didn't even catch on at first. I was like, okay, but who's the target? It's like, I was like,
there should have been
I was like, the guy across the room that he's talking to. I was like, is that the guy?
He's like, Eleazar, stop. I need to find this criminal. He's like, no, he doesn't exist. Shut up, all right? There's someone I need to kill.
He's just convinced. He's like, look, I'm sick of your shit. This is what I was told. So I can get out of here. Who is this guy? And he's like, no, man.
He's not getting it, is he?
After all of it, after he beats up all the guards and all the guys, he's just like, okay, now where is that dude? He's like, dude, you're not catching on.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, the abortionist was the most disturbing thing for me in these movies. Like, just the ideas that they present of, like, amputating limbs on an unborn child. I was just like, that made me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. And that, I think what Zahler uses, like, this like disgusting violence to create empathy. Even if you can't empathize with Vaughn's character by the sake of his choices or his dialogue, just by presenting like this is the horrible evil things he's versing, you kind of have to be like, okay, I want him to succeed because
Yeah.
I've been told something awful, so I'm naturally going to relate to him. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's a clever way to use this genre, right? A genre that revels in violence, because use violence for empathy, use violence for character relation. That's a cool way to use the tool. Yeah, no, I think technically speaking, this movie I think has got I think it's well made. The fight scenes, whether or not you think the actual fighting's done, I like the fact that they're staged very clearly. Like, to me, it really works that it's just like, here is a clear presentation of what's going on. You can see that they've actually rehearsed this, and like people swinging punches, whether or not it looks a bit funny, it's like, at least I can see it. Like, that's refreshing in action is, ever since the early 2000s, has been plagued by shaky cam. And I like having, here's a scene where you can see everybody moving, everyone doing what they're doing, stilted or not, like, it's clear, and that's kind of his style.
I don't know. I guess I feel like there's better examples of that, and not that this movie's trying to be the, some martial arts film that's got really off the wall choreography or anything like that. But it just felt low impact, which I think this movie should feel impactful in its violence.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
But that's the one thing I think it should do in its violence. Like, yes, he's a big hulking guy who punches kind of awkwardly because he's just like a big dude. Like, I'm okay with that, but when the punches don't feel like they're connecting, that's when I have a problem with it.
Crazy. Yeah, I did not feel that way.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one, because I thought I was just taking crazy pills, but...
Maybe you guys streamed a bad version or something.
And I'm sorry, you can't just tread on someone's head and move their body across the floor with your foot.
You don't know. You're not 6'4" and a boxer.
Have you ever tried?
Yeah. Like,
No.
I think if Vince Vaughn came up to me, he probably could.
Maybe hands really do look like bad rubber, and...
That was gross, though. It was
props
gross.
when you do that.
The flip over, where it's like you just and he coughs. It's like, it tickles me. I know. I also
the dude's head down the toilet.
Amazing. I also love the dialogue. Things like what we were mentioning before. Like, in one party, the guard tells him to get vertical instead of saying stand up. It's like, get vertical. Like, no one talks that way, but it's interesting way. It makes me think about what you're saying. Make like you're praying to God. God's breath doesn't smell like nachos. Like, it's just real.
That was a pretty good line.
Like, real dumb shit. But
do you think it was intentional? And I don't know if it's just a thing to make Vince Vaughn look like bigger and stronger, but like all the guards were not threatening guards.
Pretty weedy looking. A lot.
They're
of
all
them,
tiny, like stocky little dudes. And I'm like, you'd think they'd be tough, like if you were trying to make them look tough, but obviously they're just little sort of, I don't know, annoying people that are just like trying to get at him sort of thing. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting that they didn't look like threatening guards at all.
I think it's intentional. Like, it's meant to be, because I think you're meant to feel that he doesn't want to have to do this. He's not, because there is a line he says, he's like, I would rather knit baby booties than hit people for no reason. Yeah. And so I don't think his character is constantly explained that he doesn't want to be violent. He's trying to he wants to make a life. And so I think that's what it's meant to be. It's like, he is unstoppable if he has to be. And so these guys
just want to be.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's, again, even if you don't believe in his motives, like, that is what the film is telling you. And that's what it's makes.
I don't want to have to snap your arm in 3 places, and I don't want to have to break your leg. Like,
I snapped it.
I could just knock you out, and I would probably get to where I need to go. But no, I need to go. No,
I'm going to ruin your life. And
because only the worst of the worst go to Red Leaf. Did you even listen to the dialogue?
And kill the rapist you're sharing a cell with. Like,
he's not sharing a cell with a rapist.
I know, but there's got to be some bad dude in there.
Maybe. All right. Anything else to say about Brawl in Cell Block 99?
Sleep darts. Anyway.
I hate them. I just
think they look stupid. I don't know. That was just an odd scene. I wasn't expecting the sleep darts.
It was. I agree.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the sleep darts in the face. But like, okay, so if those guys basically somehow they're in the worst, I don't know why those criminals that he's after, like the ones that got him into Cell Block 99, why they're in that cell block. They don't seem like they're super bad rapists, murderers, serial killers, or anything like that. You know, it was just the drug lord or whatever. They're in there, but they're also kind of running it because the guards are listening to them and doing what they're telling them to do. So they're relaxing in a room with the TV and chilling. But they couldn't get him moved to that cell block to do that to him. They'd be like, no, you have to work your way through to here. I don't know. Anyway,
Good.
Yeah.
it's not
I had
questioning logic.
I had the same thought. I think it's implied that they're arrested because the guy Tiny, the guy that he's working with, is there, and he
Yeah.
wasn't like so he would have been arrested by the cops during the shootout as Vince
Yeah.
Vaughn was. So I think it's implied that they arrest them all, but they've got enough pull to be like, we run this prison, you know. Again, it's a tired old trope of
The guards are on the take. Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, all right. Dragged. Sorry, you got more? Any more?
No.
No? All right. Dragged across concrete. After two overzealous cops get suspended due to excessive force, they delve into the criminal underworld to get their proper compensation. All right. Definitely his most divisive film. Definitely his most controversial film. Casting two of Hollywood's most well-known conservatives and a very,
Is
controversial
Vince
Mel.
Vaughn controversial?
Yeah,
I don't know.
he's very vocally pro NRA and like pro, gun. He's like schools should have metal detectors and people should have guns in schools to protect against other people with guns. Like
course.
What you're saying is his moral thing can be questioned.
like yes, he's pro NRA, pro conservative, and he's one of the he's not problematic like Mel Gibson is, but he's very like conservative and Hollywood's
right-wing.
Hollywood is very predominantly left wing, so he is an outlier in that sense. But yeah, no. How did you guys find Mel Gibson? Do you guys have baggage with him? Did you find this off putting at all? What?
No, so look, I'm gonna be honest. Like before I started watching it, and I was like, okay, I was like, all right, I need to Google what did Mel Gibson do. I was like, what? I know that he was like known as an anti-Semite, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, what has he said? I was like, what? Because obviously, a lot of people are Nazis and racists and all this sort of stuff that get branded like that, and sometimes it's not. And I was like, okay, what's the truth of it? What actually happened? And so I read this whole timeline of like all the stuff Mel Gibson's done, and by the end of it, I was like, okay, yeah. I was like, he said some kind of bad shit. So he's, he's obviously got issues. I know it's been talked about a lot before with alcoholism and substance abuse and all this sort of stuff. And obviously he's got demons that he struggles with and everything like that. And not old points of view, but just, he's a bit out of touch with reality and society. But I enjoyed this movie.
Okay.
It is too long. It is too long.
Disagree.
But obviously, it's the least violent of all the movies. There is a couple of scenes where it's like, okay, that's violent, but this one I think is the most mainstream, probably user friendly film out of his films to watch. But I don't know. I enjoyed it. I like the chemistry between him and Vince Vaughn. I like the budding thing. I liked this moral dilemma of them being like, okay, life has dealt us a shit hand. Like, he's got the stuff with his wife, he's got stuff with his kid going on, he's suspended, he's an old man, he's just never gotten past his position, probably due to his beliefs or whatever, or the way he's done things. But I kind of like that. And something subtle like, him waiting out in the fire escape and doing this and doing that. Which when he's doing that and he's put his foot on it, it's like, okay, I'm like, yeah, this is common cop stuff, but then for the accountability to come and it's like, no, someone filmed you and you're in trouble now. So you're on the news and all this sort of stuff. I enjoyed the film. It should have been shorter, but I still enjoyed watching it. So yeah.
Yeah. Grana, what do you think?
Yeah. I didn't like this movie. This movie is definitely too long. Like if you could cut 30 minutes from Cell Block 99, you could cut an hour and a half from Concrete.
Oof.
Like I don't know. He just needs
easy.
an editor. Like you could cut a lot of time. An hour and a half is like I'm joking, but 45 minutes to an hour, I feel like you could cut from this movie. This could be a 100-minute film. I mean, like I didn't totally hate it. It definitely has its moments. I liked Vince Vaughn better in this movie. I think Vince Vaughn naturally has like a lot of charisma, and he's like he was in rom-coms for a reason, and I think he gets to be charismatic in this movie where I didn't feel he was at all in Cell Block 99. I think I agree. I think that banter between them is pretty good in this movie.
Anchovies.
Yeah,
like lasagna in a can.
There's definitely, I don't know, I definitely have problems with this movie. I don't know.
Like what? Like what?
Start
Besides,
listing them. All right. The whole plot with, I'm going to call her Deb. What's her name? Jennifer Carpenter or whatever her name is.
yeah, yeah.
The whole subplot of like, oh, I don't want to leave my baby, and then she gets just brutally
That
murdered.
messed me up. I don't like
It
that.
did, but it also just felt like, she was one day from retirement, like that old trope. That's exactly what it felt like. They're just going to introduce her to kill her off. It felt on the nose. Just, you could have cut that.
So Sorry, you go. Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. That was brutal, the way she gets shot and like all that sort of stuff. It really just upset me. I don't know if I like related to it too much, but like I
You've
feel
been
like
shot in the hold up.
no, not wanting to go to work, but like, but like I had this thought afterwards where I was like, I don't know if it would have been a better thing if like, and I know this probably seems what is the general idea of like, oh, this is what would happen in a traditional film. So we're subverting expectations, and that's why, boom, her head just gets blown off brutally when she comes back. But like, it kind of would have been interesting for her to be the one kidnapped, her to crawl across and try and shoot Vince Vaughn to go back to save her baby, and for Mel Gibson to shoot her. It's like, okay, we knew that character a bit, and like we knew why she was doing what she did, and we were kind of rooting for her to get back to her kid. And then Mel Gibson shoots her like in the face because she tried to shoot Vince Vaughn. I feel like that would give that more impact later. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know.
See, like, I feel like so that's the scene that is constantly referred to as like, it's kind of, in a lot of ways, it's kind of defines Zahler as a filmmaker, because it's like, this is what should have been deleted according to all conventional wisdom. Like, it trims 20 minutes, half an hour from an already too long film. It has no point to the plot, really.
No.
And so there's a sense of like, okay, this shouldn't exist. Like, this scene is really like a first draft scene, should be cut. However, I think it is exactly what works. It's exactly what makes him work in my mind. It's the inclusion of this scene that kind of like, yeah, this is why I love his stuff, because it just creates this sense of fatalism and this sense of absolute sort of like just the cynical dread of it all, where you're like, this is a character you're introduced, you immediately understand why you care, because Jennifer Carpenter's really good in this scene. Like, she cries real tears, and it's like, holy crap, I get that.
Yeah.
And it's like the American system is broken, and she has to go back to work, and look what's happened. She's gotten killed because she's defending ultra rich people, not even defending ultra rich people's money. She's just caught up in it. And I think that by trying to have her as another character towards the end, it would distract from the main. It would slow the movie down more so by trying to have three prongs of like 3 point of views. But by having it just come in, instantly relate, and then killed, it really creates a sense of, oh boy, everything is hopeless. I feel it puts you off. This movie is a feeling. This movie is not the concept. This movie is not the idea. The movie is, how do I make you like? How do I make my audience react? And I think when you look at it, like, coming back to the opening scene, it is literally like, okay, Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn are cops. So I'm already sort of like, I don't like Mel Gibson, but cops are supposed to be good. They're arresting a drug dealer, but they're brutal. So they've done the wrong thing by brutalizing him, but he was going to fill schools with drugs. So I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Also tortured his presumably innocent girlfriend. Like,
they tortured, presumably, but she's also knows that he's a drug dealer who hides his money in the thing. Yeah. So is she really innocent? They've been let go for 6 weeks because they didn't do it nicely. It is, and like the comment about the black coffee, where he's like, I'm not a racist. Every Martin Luther King Day, I order a cup of dark roast. It's delivered intentionally like serious in verse. Like, the world, he says that seriously and no one's laughing. It's like, he means that. But we as the audience are like, that's absurd. You get it. But then he has a black girlfriend who he wants to propose to and loves. And so it is constantly like, here is one way of looking at it, and here is another that's going to sort of undermine or contradict that point of view. And I find it's all I think it's all snarkily done. I think he doesn't intentionally do, but like, I don't actually have a stance or a care. I don't know. The whole big conversation about cancel culture is like, we know what it does. I'm like, I honestly don't know if he believes that. I think that he just goes, this is the debate that's dominating a post-Trump era. Like, I don't know. It's like, it all elicits reactions because it does make you think about what you feel. It brings out a reaction to you whether you want it to or not. Like every commentary about this film is like like you want to be put off ease. Like there's this great piece by Adam Naiman who writes for The Ringer, and he talks about it. He's like, this movie just makes you feel like you've been dragged across concrete. Like it pushes until they break. It's just creating reactions. And I think that's so good. And 2 hours and 40 minutes needs to be long because you cannot create a gnawing piece of uncomfortable, fatalistic film in an hour and a half. You can't.
You didn't need so much stakeout.
You did, because it creates the monotony. It creates the feeling of it.
Now,
just give me the egg salad scene, and then that's it. That's the best scene. We don't need anything else other than that.
Do you mean the scene where Vince Vaughn's eating the sandwich?
Yeah,
so good.
a single red ant could have finished that quicker.
Yeah, just all you can hear is him chewing. It's good. Like that works. But I don't need the rest of it.
Conan, as someone who plays video games,
I
believe this movie has the worst interpretation of someone playing video games
Yes,
I've ever seen
it's way up
in
there.
my life. They're playing a PS4 at the start, playing a game that looks like a PS2 game.
It is. It's
weird
It's one of the Cabela's. It's one of the Cabela games.
It's a PS2 game that they're playing with 2 PS4 controllers, 2-player. There's only one person on the screen.
Yep.
The controllers aren't on. The TV cabinet has no cords coming out of it. It's just standing in the middle of the room. So it's not plugged into anything at all, this TV or anything. Then at the end, they play the same game, but it's on Xbox now. I was like, this keeps getting worse. It's like the worst visualization of video games.
It's a commentary on consoles, right? He's a big Xbox fan, and so when he's a millionaire, that's the console he wants to have. He gets rid of the peasant PlayStation, and he's got an Xbox.
He's got Game Pass now.
The fact that they end on a scene playing video games, and then he has that terrible line of "Let's hunt some lions." Oh my goodness, it's so bad.
So here's the thing: the jungle is the city. It's a concrete jungle.
I get the analogy. I don't think it's good.
It's the city, baby.
Oh, for goodness sakes. Conan, do you like this movie because you're a contrarian? Like, because I feel like because he's breaking all the rules, but he's doing it because he knows he's doing it. And he's doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
Is that part of it?
I think
Conan bait.
Partially, I think his movies, like I said with Tomahawk, he knows how to tell stories. His stories run. His story hums at a low speed, and at moments it ramps it up. Like it just works. So I think all of his movies have an incredible narrative propulsion, despite being so long. I think he knows how characters work, and thus knows how drama works. And he intentionally can. And the same with like all the greats, like Tarantino, have been like he breaks the rules. Like Pulp Fiction, everyone who's talked about that movie is like, oh, Tarantino movies are all dialogue. You can't do that. It's like, yeah, we know. When you know the rules, you can break them. It's the exact same principle here.
I think he's just a poor imitation of Tarantino in that
I don't think he's an imitator, though. I don't think he's imitating. I think he's taking inspiration from like every single filmmaker post Tarantino has.
Sure.
I don't think he's being like, I'm trying to make Tarantino films though, because they're very different. Like, so I think there's that.
Yeah, one's good and one's not that great.
Piss off.
One's box office success, the other one's not.
Yeah, I mean that could say probably more. Yeah, because the box office is a great metric.
I know. I'm mostly joking.
I do generally think though. I find like we've talked about this before with films like the Three Colors trilogy, where it's like those movies aren't entertaining. Do movies need to be entertaining? What's their purpose? Oh well, whether it be an intellectual exercise, should they make you feel something emotionally? What is the purpose? There's different reasons. I do find value in art for the sake of eliciting a response, whether that is repulsion, whether that is like melodramatic adoration, whichever. Like the whole reason we see horror movies is because not for the thrilling narratives of Jason Voorhees, it's to feel something. Like cinema has a history. It's comedy, horror, action. They all make us feel more so than, the story was really compelling. It's like, no, I felt excited watching that. I laughed, I cried, blah, blah, blah. I do think that reactionism is, his reactionary things it's a reaction. And so I think this movie just creates reaction and it gets you to feel and think something. And I think that's valuable. Like, for me, I find that incredibly valuable. It does make you react. I admire them technically, but I also think these movies are good because they're not trying to preach. They're not trying to say something. In a similar way that David Fincher is really cynical in all of his movies. It's like everyone sucks and all his movies are kind of despairing. These movies are the same, but it's also tongue-in-cheek. It's like, yeah, but I don't know. Is that really a problem? I don't know. I want, and that's the thing. This movie divides. People don't like it often because it's like he's not saying anything, and that's a very reasonable criticism. And if that's where it sort of hits for people, that's fine. That's for me. That's not a problem with it though. Like this is a movie that I would defend till my last breath, but I would never try to say you need to like this or
Sure.
I just think that what it's trying to do, it does perfectly. And like we've talked about that before, that based on its own merits, what it's trying to do, I think it succeeds 100%. The problem is what it does is naturally off-putting for a lot of people and is naturally a hard sell.
I think that's my problem with it, right? Like, I've talked about it before where like, I'm trying, they're trying to parody something that is bad. They're trying to parody something that's boring. Well, you're just making something that is boring. Like, I don't want to watch that.
Yeah.
Like WandaVision was the example where we're gonna imitate these boring 60s sitcoms. It's like, well, now I'm just watching a boring 60s sitcom and I want to do something else with my time, and that's how this movie makes me feel. And I appreciate that you like it, and in some ways I do feel like maybe I don't understand movies well enough to enjoy this movie, and I'm okay with that.
It's a tough thing. This is again why I love his movies, because they're really hard to even engage with, and there seems to be such a weird discourse of people, myself included, being like, how is everyone not loving these movies? And then other people are like, how is anybody giving these movies the time of day? Like, I can't think of a filmmaker in recent memory who's elicited such a visceral reaction. And it's totally fine that people don't like this. I get that it's going to be, I think by its inception, it's going to be hated by a lot of people. It's going to be loved by the rest. It's just, for whatever reason, and this comes down to how people receive films, people do film criticism. It really works for me. It works for some people. Like, there are Letterboxd is interesting to look at, where like some people, like, they adore this movie, other people just are repulsed by it. And like it's the thing. It's really hard to even say, is this movie quote unquote good or bad? It's really more like, how do I feel about this movie? And that I think is just super fascinating, because like, I don't know, because it's got to elicit reaction, and it's got to make you think, oh, this sucks or this is great. And like, not many movies do that. Most movies you leave and you go, oh yeah, that's fine.
Like, I mean, look, I give it props. I give it props for doing something different. Like, it's not, like, I do appreciate that, and I appreciate that there are people out there who have a vision and are going for it, even if it's a vision that I don't enjoy or I don't appreciate. Yeah. Like, I think that's important too. Because out of that, there will be things that I do enjoy and that wouldn't have been made otherwise, right? Like, not everything has to be for everyone.
Yeah. Like, I think, that's a good way to put it. That sums up my 40 minutes of rambling. Like, and not everything is for everyone.
Sorry, and I don't dislike this movie because, I'm not saying, their message on cancel culture is wrong, so this movie should be cancelled or he should be cancelled. Like, I don't have that opinion. I do think he's not really trying to say anything, or if he is, he's kind of trying to have his cake and eat it too, maybe. But
it's just boring for you. Like,
it just didn't feel.
That's fair.
It just didn't click with me, I guess.
Yeah, look, you're a bit in between. I feel like you're a bit in between. You liked it, but you didn't love it. Did you?
I enjoyed it. I think I overall enjoyed it more than Cell Block.
Yep.
If I was, it's a long slog. It's dragged across concrete. So I don't know if I'd watch either of them two again. I'd maybe watch Bone Tomahawk again. But I enjoyed it. I wish Mel Gibson should have just trusted that dude. Just trusted him. He could have got away with the gold.
Should he have though?
But maybe not.
Yeah. It's like, did he do the wise thing by not trusting him?
No, because he got shot.
Yeah.
And died.
But you guys say there is the scene in all of these movies. What is the scene? Is it Jennifer Carpenter getting her arm shot off and then shot in the head? Is that the scene?
That was it for me.
Yeah.
That was the scene for me.
But the guy with his entrails coming out because they had to get the key.
I had to go. But I think the bank is it's a combination of that and when they drive past, you see that the manager's been castrated.
Yeah, but even that is like a flash. Like, it's not. Yeah. It's not glorified like some of the other moments.
No, that's right. Yeah, this one doesn't really have, like, in the same way. You can't be like, there's no split down the middle. Or
this one was definitely the bank thing for me. Like,
yeah.
And Conan, you spoke to it earlier about how it's meant to make you feel. Like, it really put me off. Like, I was just like, that's just shit. I was like, this sucks. I was like, it's a shitty feeling. The
Yeah.
world's a messed up place. I
And
was
it, like that's exactly right. And so the criticisms of it, the criticisms of the movie being like it's just nasty, it's just nihilistic, it's just cruelty for cruelty's sake. That is a valid criticism. And it's like that is how if that's how you view and want art to be, like that is absolutely fine because that's how art works. It's different for everybody. Like just for me, I'm like I can only imagine if I saw it at a different time in my life or if I was in a different headspace, maybe I would be like, this movie's awful. I can't stand it.
Mm,
But for whatever reason, it speaks to sort of my interest, and I'm like, I think that that gels. And like maybe this thing it's a litmus test. Maybe that says something terrible about me. Maybe if I like this movie, it's like okay, I'm a monster, but I don't know because like it gets crueler, right? Like it gets pretty nasty. The villains, like they call black gloves and grey gloves in the credits. And they are
yeah.
just like complete evil, right? The first scene we meet them, he just walks into a to like a convenience store and just shoots everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's going on? Why? And then the next one just kills two dudes getting in the car. It's like,
Yeah.
it's an interesting way to like offset again the problematic behavior of our quote unquote heroes. Whereas like these guys are racist cops, but they're trying to rob robbers who are like the epitome of evil. These guys are absolute horror, right? Like they're cartoonishly racist in every scene,
James Bond villains and
but like to the next level, right? Like every single interaction they with is racist, and it's just this weird thing of like, okay, these guys they're so cartoonishly bad, but they're still obviously bad. So you want to see them get killed. It's just like, yeah, I don't know. And you end up rooting for Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn. It's like, oh, this makes me feel uncomfortable. What is that
yeah.
about? Like,
Yeah.
did you guys like the final showdown? Sort of the whole, the heist in the parking, the I don't know what it is out in the desert.
Yeah.
I did. I liked their
Yeah.
like armored masks. Reminded me of Army 2. I was like, okay, this is cool.
Yeah.
This setup. I liked Vince Vaughn, like slowly in his old age, getting down on his knee, like under the car with the sniper and all this sort of stuff. It was like a cool methodical thing of like these two old cops, like, and what can they do with their like what tricks can they pull out of the bag against these guys with high tech stuff.
Did you guys think that the dripping from the petrol or whatever it was
gonna
ignite when he's shot? Like I was just waiting for that to happen.
Yeah,
and it never did.
too.
Like really
like,
blue
he's gonna
balled me
burn to
there.
death.
But anyway,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
like his comment. He's like, it's more of a trickle now. He's like, it's not dripping now.
I think it's something that I really like about this movie, besides all what we've already talked about, is kind of how it explores like this heist, right? But it keeps it constantly compelling, sort of how every character is thought about. Like everyone's sort of thought it through, and there's an interesting like they know exactly what to do, and it's not something you see in a normal movie. Like when they're following the car, they mention how like we're going to have to gas up soon. It's like, do you have gas cans in the car? Do you really ask me that? It's like, okay, they've thought about how long a heist is going to go, how long this tailgate is going to go for. When they get into that shootout, he's like, okay, I've got the right angle here. I can do it this way. Like Henry and I can't remember his other name, Biscuit. They wrap the guns in cellophane. It's like for fingerprints. And so later on, he could be like, hey, we should get some cellophane noodles after this, which is a technical term for a rice noodle. It's like, oh, he's giving him a nod. I'm like, there's just these clever little things like that's how they figured out how to do it. And I've never seen that before. Like I've never seen a movie that sort of explicitly says how the mechanics of this heist are going to work and how they get out of this. It's usually just to grab the gun and everything works. It's like, though these characters are clever, and it feels like it's kind of this very slow chess match more than an action sort of heist. I'm like, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Did you guys like Henry as a character? The other side of the protagonists?
yeah, I enjoyed him like knowing that they were getting tailed and not revealing it.
Not
Like,
revealing it. He was playing his own game.
Yeah, you've kind of figured it out pretty early. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the painting their faces white as to these security guards?
Is that a thing of him being like, hey, we can do whiteface? Is the director just being
maybe,
like, oh,
maybe?
you know?
It just reminded me of White Chicks. That's all I could think of.
But, yeah.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I don't know what else there is to talk. We've unpacked a lot about this movie already. I don't know what else there is in the technical sense. I don't know, it was nice to see what's her face from The Walking Dead again as playing Mel Gibson's wife.
Mm.
Like she hasn't really done much post The Walking Dead, so that was cool.
Laurie or something, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really know. I feel like this movie is like we've all had reactions to it, right? And it's kind of like you can't see the forest through the trees because it's like you're hitting roadblocks with it. Do you guys feel like that's fair? I don't know. Would you ever recommend this to someone, or would you?
No.
Are you guys thinking about this movie anymore? Or are you like, or are you kind of put it to the side and be like, no, I'm done with it?
Oh, I'm done. Yeah. Like I thought about them a little bit afterwards, but it was mostly about how much I disliked them and how much Conan was going to tear into me for that.
Whoa.
I'd recommend it to my friend Conan, but that's
actually I do know a guy who would probably like these movies. But anyway, we'll move on.
Him.
What was that UFO movie that you liked for years, Conan? That was just talking the whole time?
Yeah, he would like these.
So he liked that movie, and I think he might like this movie too for some reason.
Shout out to a former podcast host.
Yeah. Shout out to Keenan if you're still listening.
Yeah. Well, okay, that's fair. All right, let's rank them then. For me, I think this is the best. I think it goes Dragged, Bone, and then Brawl is the worst.
I have this over Bone.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay. Wow. Wasn't expecting that. 1, 3, 2 for me.
1 through 2.
Yeah, it's 1, 2, 3 for me.
1, 2, 3.
All have opposing opinions. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like Bone is a close contender. And like Bone definitely has been influential on me. I've watched these movies a few times now, and I've already talked about it ad nauseum. This movie just gels with me in such a weird way. Again, I'm not a racist.
You have to say that.
Every Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah. I'm going to start making a special order. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, look, I don't know if you've got anything else to say. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in this episode of The Good, Bad, and the Worst. It was brought to you by a horror western that I wrote. Not at all inspired by Bone Tomahawk, but don't look that up. It's called The Taste of Iron. You can find it anywhere. If you like this podcast, we do have another podcast that is on hiatus. It's coming soon. I don't know if we can. I don't know if we can say the name here.
No, not yet.
No, not yet. It'll be a big reveal, but keep following us if you want to. Yeah, if you want to watch that. Like us and share us on all socials. Please rate and subscribe. It really helps.
What movie are we doing next week?
What movie are we doing next, Luke?
So next fortnight, another non-traditional trilogy, seeming as the floodgates are open now.
We've lost our way.
But I do think this is going to be an interesting one, and I want your guys' opinion on it. So, in 2017, 3 films came out in the same year, all around the same subject matter and event, but from 3 different perspectives. And covering from 3 different kind of genres as well. How interesting is this?
I know what this is, but I can't think of it.
So, and this is my excuse to get Griner's detailed opinion on this. We are doing the Dunkirk trilogy. So in 2017, in 2017 there was The Darkest Hour with Gary Oldman, which covers this war from the politics point of view. So it starts with Darkest Hour, which is highly rated as well critically. All 3 of these films are really good. Then you have the war perspective, so Dunkirk by Christopher Nolan, our boy Christopher Nolan, Dunkirk. Finishing off with a movie called Their Finest, which is set after the Dunkirk about which is a comedy drama about a group of students making a propaganda film after the events of Dunkirk, about the events of Dunkirk, which is also highly rated, and I hadn't heard of it before. But all 3 of these films came out in 2017, which I found very strange. And apparently a lot of people recommend them as a really good trilogy to watch. Like to see it from the political point of view and what these, people in their suits are deciding for these soldiers, seeing it on floor level and how it impacted people in the civilian thing after the events of Dunkirk. So I thought it'd be an interesting trilogy to discuss. And I really want to delve deep into Griner's thoughts on why he didn't like Dunkirk when he watched it. And this is the only way we'll be able to do it.
I have to actually justify myself now.
And
All right.
so, yes, a couple of short films too. So
I'm very curious about how we're going to tie this as a thing, but I've never heard of. I've
you'll
never
be
even heard of The
surprised,
Finest.
apparently.
Yeah,
You'll be
okay,
surprised.
right on.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, looking forward to it. So the Dunkirk trilogy coming up. All right, thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Yeah.